What's up friends, Stobbie here and welcome back to this DLC breakdown of the upcoming Battle Brothers patches. Next up, Devblog 101, new weapons, and this is what I'm really looking forward to. Man, I can't wait for this. Okay, we take a break from looking at things that make your life harder. Take a look at things that make your life easier this week. The upcoming Beasts and Exploration DLC will add a bouquet of new weapons. Some of them will fill gaps in the progression of existing weapon types, while others are hybrid and niche weapons to create new builds and tactics with. All of them will add more variety to human opponents like brigands. Just keep in mind that details may still change depending on how playtesting goes. Take a look. So filling the gaps. First off, several of the new weapons are designed to fill gaps in the tiered progression of individual weapon types. The longsword is a lower tier version of the greatsword, but no less versatile. It allows us to more gradually introduce two-handed swords with enemies, and it allows you to use a less costly alternative earlier in the game. Similarly, the two-handed wooden hammer is a lower tier version of the existing two-handed hammer, and while previously the Orc Berserker chain was the only two-handed flail in the game, there's now two tiers of human two-handed flails as well. Awesome! God, I can't wait for these two-handed flails. That's so great! Two-handed maces. Maces now come in massive two-handed variants. They excel in single target damage and crowd control, and like their one-handed cousins, they apply a lot of additional fatigue damage. Receiving a blow from a weapon like this will leave anyone dazed and gasping for air, and this is reflected in the cudgel skill applying the new dazed effect. A dazed character will have their maximum fatigue, initiative and damage output reduced. The other skill of the two-handed maces is called strike down, and will stun the target for a whole 2 turns instead of just 1 turn with one-handed maces. This also plays into a new perk which we'll explain in another dev blog. Oh god, I'm getting so excited. I literally have goosebumps. The pole hammer. The new pole hammer is the pole arm variant of the warhammer. Oh, desire intensifies. A weapon designed to neutralize heavily armored targets. With 2 tiles of range, a pole hammer can be used from behind the front line and outside the range of most other melee weapons to batter, deform, and rip enemy armor. Against unarmored or lightly armored targets, however, other pole arms perform better. The spetum. Even more defense-oriented than a pike, the two-handed spetum is used like a cross between pike and spear in the game. It is a specialized pole arm that is less damaging than the pike, but can be used to form a more deadly, yet more fatiguing spear wall than with a one-handed spear, particularly useful against beasts. Very interesting. The throwing spear. Throwing weapons also get some love with the new throwing spear. Larger than a javelin, it's a consumable item similar to the throwing net and designed to take out shields from afar. Awesome! That'll be good on our frontline guys with their shields out while they're waiting for enemies to approach us. I mean, of course it'll use fatigue, but if we can do some preemptive shield damage as the enemies approach, it'll be awesome. The Goedendach. A curious hybrid between club and spear, the Goedendach is a two-handed weapon that enjoys popularity with militia and similar non-professional outfits. It comes with the thrust skill of the spear, making it easy to hit with, as well as the knockout skill of maces, enabling the user to incapacitate their opponents. Very cool. I think this is going to be like a middle tier weapon by the looks of things. So it's probably still going to be pitchforks in the beginning for the backline. And also, one other thing I'm 100% confident about. I've pronounced that wrong. Goedendach, yeah. Right. The three-headed flail, also called, oh god, I wish I'd practiced this. Ocean three-header is a less common weapon. It works the same as any other one-handed flail in the game, except for one detail. Every attack is split into 3 separate ones, one for each of the striking heads, and each head can hit or miss, and hit body or head separately. That's a good thing if you're looking for consistent damage and a high chance to hit the enemy at all. For example, to apply the poisoned effects, or because you're fighting a fragile enemy with high defenses. Ghosts. On the other hand, this weapon will split damage between head and body even more so than other weapons, making it ill-suited if you're looking to brute force your way through enemy armor. Super interesting. And I think this is, yeah, it's still going to be a flail, so you could have quite a useful flail raider now who uses a two-handed flail as his primary weapon. and then switches to one of these three headed flails depending on the enemy type. Very cool. And last but not least, the fencing sword. Another uncommon weapon is the fencing sword, a light and elegant blade that favors a swift and mobile fighting style. It comes with a skill unique only to this weapon, lunge. Using the lunge skill, the user will dash toward a target 2 tiles away, followed immediately by a precise thrusting attack to catch the target unprepared. Lunge gets a damage bonus scaling with the user's initiative. The quicker the user, and the less armor weighing them down, the more damage they do. Ooh. With a fencing sword, a combatant gains a lot of mobility, dancing between enemies to make precise strikes if any opening should present itself. Interesting. There's even more new weapons coming, both legendary ones to be found by exploring the wilds and craftable ones. But we don't want to spoil these, you'll just have to find them for yourself. Oh man, it's a lot here. God, I can't wait for this. So I'm particularly glad to see that there's two-handed maces, because you guys know how much I love raiders, the guys that use two-handed weapons. And the introduction of a lot of these enemy types that are going to demand crowd control kind of made me think, oh well, I'm going to have to make 2 of my 7 guys up front mace users, you know, assuming it will be one-handed mace users. But this is awesome, because if they're talented enough and have the stats, you can make them two-handed mace users. Like they can have this as their primary weapon, and then they can have a wooden stick for friendly fire crowd control. They're quite nice and versatile, and that's going to address the issue I've had with super late game mace users, because it's a one-handed weapon. Even with Berserk and all the damaging abilities, it just does not do enough damage. And even if you build a duelist with all the damage abilities, you'll be weak by the way, because you haven't taken a lot of defensive perks, you still at most can only kill 1 or 2 enemies in a turn because of the fact that you're only attacking 1 enemy at a time. And I think that's still going to be the same thing with this two-handed mace though. But anyway, the fact that you could only kill like 1 or 2 enemies per turn with the one-handed mace was the main thing that turned me off of it. But I think it's going to be mandatory having mace specialists, at least 2, maybe even 4. I foresee a lot of campaigns going badly in the beginning as we figure this stuff out. The pole hammer I really like. I mean, it's gonna count as a pole arm. So this actually makes me more curious about getting pikemen in my setup. So like in the past, I've had pikemen that have used a pike, obviously, and a halberd, and the halberd has been bloody great at wrecking armor against orcs. But I did find that comparatively, the Dane axe does, you know, almost as good armor damage, whereas it also has the versatility of being an axe. You know, it breaks shields and it's good against armor. Now this pole hammer, I want to see what the numbers are, but I think that's going to be damn good. And this is going to be a godsend for those undead invasions when you're dealing with all those heavily armored undead types. Very nice to see that. Okay, the Spetum. This is interesting, and I'm very keen to see what its cost is. It doesn't look like a super expensive weapon, but I think it's going to sit in the position between the pitchfork and the pike. They're particularly useful against beasts. I mean, that's quite nice. I mean, you can hold enemies at bay from the back line. I'm just imagining a formation where I've got guys up front with one-handed spears, 2 or 3 guys at the back with speetums, and then 2 archers shooting the whole time. And then the introduction of the spetum maintaining a spear wall will allow you to alternate front and back line with the spear wall. So your front or your back can be resting. That's a huge buff to spear walls. I really like that. I can't wait to use it. The throwing spear, as I already mentioned, that's going to be awesome. It's a consumable, so it's going to be expensive. I've for a long time wanted to play around with a build where my frontline hedge knights have throwing weapons. The downside, of course, is that those hedge knights tend to use helmets that ruin their vision, so they can't throw further than 2 tiles anyway. But I think that these throwing spears are going to be quite nice when we have enemies approaching us with shields, like, you know, raiders and brigand leaders. Just throw a few speetums just to soften up that shield. Then you join the battle lines, and our shield breakers in the back line. Finish off the shield, front line goes to work. Really cool. This also makes me think that this could make the Roman or Hoplite playthrough doable. Because I've for a long time been thinking about a playthrough where I want to do 12 brothers who are almost identical. All of them have rotation. They all have shield specialists. They all have throwing weapons and spear specialization. So all 12 of them can throw spears and move forward together and keep their shields up. And then if someone in the front gets injured, then the guy at the back just rotates him. It's obviously got huge setbacks to it, or disadvantages, particularly against enemy archers, but it could be fun to try it. It's not going to be successful long term, I don't think, but this could make it a bit more viable. So the Goedendag, I like the fact that it's got thrust for the plus hit. If this is similarly priced to the Speetum, then it's another buff to pole arm users. And you might even be able to justify having, instead of spreading out the roles between pole arm users and frontline guys, you have all of them exactly the same. And the frontline guys have bags and belts and quick hands, and they can, fight with whatever they would fight on the front line, but once they're too injured, they get rotated out, and then they switch to their two-handed weapon. I don't know, it seems a bit greedy though. Still, very cool. Three-headed flail, I don't have too much to add other than what I said earlier. I do like the fact that it's going to fill a bit of a tactical gap in the armory and the abilities of a two-handed flail user. I love two-handed flails. They're going to be so good if you get it onto a brother who has, if it's a juggler or a killer on the run, and he has stars in melee defense and melee attack, good fatigue. He'll just pop open enemy raiders' heads like you can't believe, and then still be able to use his three-headed flail against very high defense enemies. This will also be quite good. It'll synergize with... Now, what's that skill called again? I forget what it's called. It's a top tier skill that it makes the enemy roll for morale check, even if you do 1 point of damage. So I wonder if you hit with all three, it's going to make him roll for morale 3 times. So that could be fantastic. Never even mind the damage of a two-handed flail. You have someone who just has that ability. I'm just blanking on what it's called. Fearsome, I think it's called. And his ability is just to break the morale of enemies. That's so cool. Okay, the fencing sword. So this seems to me to be pretty obviously something that you want to put on a sword master. One with high initiative, high defense. But I worry about the long-term viability of these lightly armored frontline guys. You need to combine them with someone that's got taunt. Because, I mean, almost all of the biggest battles just turn out into long, drawn-out slugfests. But I'll certainly try building a fencing master. Someone with a lot of initiative, so they almost always get to go first. That dodgy skill where they get extra defense. Super, super, super interesting. Wonder if you could even justify having like a sword master with quick hands. Like he lunges in with a fencing sword, then he quick hands us to a long sword, and then he goes into riposte. Very, very interesting. God, I can't wait. But I think what I'm most keen to use is the three-headed flail. A lot of fun. Right, next. The Webnecht. So far, we've talked about 2 new enemies that are part of the upcoming Beasts and Exploration DLC and intended to spice up the mid to late game. We want to bring fresh enemies to all stages of the game, so this week we'll take a look at a new beast aimed to bring variety mostly to the early game. So let's crawl. The Webnecht. The Webnecht is a large arachnid that lives in sizable colonies in the dark areas of forests throughout the world of Battle Brothers. It's there that they spin their webs between trees to trap anything from bird to deer and between. Unlike most other beasts, Webnechts don't usually roam a lot, preferring instead to sit in their territory and wait until something unfortunate gets itself caught in one of their nets. Still, they are known to choose the vicinity of settlements for their home on occasion and threaten the lives of villagers and their livestock. Oof. The presence of a large enough number of Webnechts is heralded by extensive webs spanning from brush to tree to rock, uniquely transforming any combat environment in a way that leaves no doubt about who lives there. Worse still, amidst the webbing are nests of eggs, and these eggs hatch during combat. You can seek them out and destroy them with a single strike before they hatch. But otherwise, as combat goes on, there's always the danger of more and more 8-legged terrors swarming you until you cut down enough to make it ebb. Oh god. Orange Jesus, help us. Webnecks make use of the Weave Web skill. Excuse me. Weave around their opponents a sticky web, which prevents anyone trapped inside from moving and reducing their ability to attack with full force or defend themselves effectively. Characters can attempt to free themselves of the web during their turn, and each failed attempt increases the chance of subsequent attempts succeeding. But doing so can quickly become tiring, which only works in the arachnid's favour. Webnecks aren't as frenzied in their attacks as, for example, direwolves are. Instead, they choose to let their opponents tire themselves out by struggling in the webs, and they wait until an opportunity presents itself and their opponent is distracted before they attempt to bite them, a single time per turn. They act as a swarm, and so the more oversized spiders surrounding a target and acting in concert, the more effective they become. Archers are going to be vital. The Webneck's bites aren't terribly dangerous to the armored mercenary, but Webnecks are poisonous, and receiving hit point damage will apply it. Unlike the poison employed by goblins, the Webneck poison does damage to vital organs over several turns, and characters can die from it. The antidote item already in the game works just as well against this kind of poison, however, and is more important now than ever. In fact, it can now be crafted at will if you have the necessary components. More of that in next week's dev blog. This is awesome. What a cool enemy. I think spear walls are going to be super important, but that's going to depend on how far they can shoot these webs. If they can shoot them at range, spear wall isn't going to matter so much. Archer is going to be super important. Throwing weapons as they close in, all going to be super important. God, I can't wait. I'm so hyped. This is going to be so good. Yeah, this, I mean, as they say, it's an early game threat. In the late game, they're not going to be too scary. Hopefully they give decent experience so we can use them to farm XP on our lower level guys. Right, okay, so that's Dev Blog 102, the Webnecht. I'm going to take a little break, and when we come back, Dev Blog 103, crafting. God, I can't wait. As always, guys, let me know what you think in the comments and your own thoughts on how you think these enemies will be best dealt with. God, I can't wait. I wish I hadn't actually read all this stuff. I'm just like, oh, I'm itching now. Get these DLCs in. Okay. Thanks for watching, friends. I'm Stobbie, and as always, catch you next time.